This is the Inclusion Conversation. I'm your host, Grace Young Foster, founder and CEO of the Inclusion Initiative. I'm an adoptee, I'm a foster care alum, and I'm passionate about elevating our communities. It's time we're included and visible in the conversations about work, careers, and just life. Let's be visible and let's be loud. Join me now. Hi. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Inclusion Conversation. I'm Grace Young Foster. I'm your host. I'm the founder and CEO of the Inclusion Initiative. And it's just really great to be in community with all of you again. I know we took a short break, but we're back. And this month is October. It's Foster Youth Voices Awareness Month. It's a really important month, especially to me, having been a foster. I'm also an adoptee. And I really appreciate that we can celebrate our voices, elevate our voices, and be in community with one another and remind each other, right? We're not alone. And together, we're stronger together. We're better together. And so it's really my pleasure this week to introduce you to Andrew Bridge. So I've been following Andrew for quite a while. Super inspiring, super just authentic and real. And, his story is pretty amazing. And let me just read a little bit about him and his work, and then we'll dive into our conversation. So Andrew Bridge spent 11 years in the LA County foster care system before earning a scholarship to Wesleyan University and graduating from Harvard Law School. He is a Fulbright Fellow and a Rockefeller Founder writing resident. His work has garnered coverage in the New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times, Showtime, The Observer, CBS Early Show, NBC Nightly News, you name it, he's been on it. And he is a sought-after expert in his field. He regularly consults with child welfare systems, children's facilities, and private foundations. As a member of Arizona's Foster Care Review Board, Andrew advises Arizona's juvenile court on the safety and well-being of individual children in the state's care. Andrew, welcome. It's so great to be in community with you today.
It's so awesome to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, and I would love to start our conversation. Again, a huge fan of your work. Your books are amazing. Anyone that's had the opportunity to read them, can become familiar with your story. But there are so many people that are listening in that are not yet familiar with you. And I would love for you to share, what do you want us, this community, to know about your experience as a foster?
When you ask that question, the first thing that comes to mind is how long I spent in care, 11 and a half years, which is a long time. It was a long time then. It's a long time now. When I look at a child's case and I see the length of that time, that's unusual. And that it didn't need to be that long. From the day that I was taken, all that any lawyer, judge, or social worker had to ask was, Andy, do you have family? And that 6-year-old would have said, I had a great uncle, a great aunt, another uncle, and 3 cousins, and those are just on my mom's side. And if someone asked that, I would have gone home. So I think that, like so many children and young adults, they end up in foster care for far too long, and that can be a very hard thing, a very devastating thing. So that's the first thing I suppose comes to mind.
Yeah, when you say that, it definitely resonates. I spent a short time as a foster because I ended up becoming adopted, but into a home where there were 20 kids. And we had foster kids in and out of the home too. And I had siblings, foster siblings and adopted siblings that, like you, spent years in the system, were passed around to 10, dozen, 15 plus homes in such a short amount of time. And they are like lost stories. you don't often hear about, what was the outcome for youth that had that experience. Like what I have heard a lot, just in our spaces, right, are the outcomes of, you hear a lot about adoptees, right? Because they were placed into a home, they grow up, a lot thrive, a lot do have challenges, but you hear a lot more of those thriver stories than you do of people that were in the foster system. And, I know you have dedicated your career and spending your life advocating for youth that have experienced all of this. And, when you think about the stories, the voices, the faces, the people, right, left behind and just kind of forgotten, is that what propelled you to start your career and your journey in this really great advocacy and policy work that you do?
I'd say that there were two things, and certainly that is one of them. And that would be the kids that I remember, and the kids whose stories will never be told. I included some in both of my books, but for the vast majority, we will not hear their stories. Um, and I remember their names: Bobby, Alvy, Sandra, all of them. Um, I think the other reason that was important was another voice that goes missing so often, and that was the voice of my mom. From the moment that I was detained and put into the system, my mother never met a teacher that I had, never went to a holiday concert in my elementary school, was never invited to dinner at my foster parents' house. And she was perfectly capable of doing any of those things. Those things would have meant the world to her. And certainly I felt that as a child, that absence growing up. But now what I think of is what that must have done to that 24-year-old mother.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
it's sobering, but it's also like you said, it's such a great reminder of why we lean into this work and why voices like ours are so critical. And will you share a little bit about, having experienced what you did, having the whole range of emotions of, you know, being upset, being right told that you're not worthy to stay here, or, some, at least in my experience, in the family that I was placed in, when they were relinquished from the home, a lot of the language was, you're bad. We don't want you because you're bad. You're a bad person. We can't fix you. We can't have this in our house. Just like really dehumanizing things. And it really can wear and truly impacts the person's capability to see themselves as like whole, healthy people. And then further, right, that mindset really impacts the ability and opportunity for that person to reach for the stars.
Yeah.
And some can and do, right? They can and can overcome those words. It still hurts, right? And it still
Mhm.
sits there.
Yeah.
But they achieve things they were told they could achieve.
Yeah.
But for a lot of kids in the system or that are passed around in these homes, um, it impacts their ability to be able to really believe in themselves
Yeah.
and do things like you have accomplished. And so talk a little bit about what that experience was like for you, like how it felt, right, to come from those spaces. And then all of a sudden you find yourself at Harvard Law School. Like it's such a stark contrast of worlds, of how you're spoken to, of how you're looked at. Like
Mhm.
when you have an institution like that behind your name, it does something profound, both internally and externally. And I would love to hear a little bit about, your experience with that.
Well, I would say that um, where I've come, and so I grew up in foster care and then went on to actually work in the system. So I have partnered with departments. I have sued departments. I've been an employee of a department, and they still talk to me. But where I come from and where I finally got myself was to forgive.
Hmm.
So to forgive the way I was taken from my mom. Um, the way I was taken from my mom was on a public street while she was in a bra and shorts screaming. I know professionally we'd call that a botch taking,
Yeah.
but that didn't need to happen. So I, I think also what I remember and what I feel when I talk to kids is how much we blame kids in the system. And I'll give you some examples. How many times we use the phrase the child failed their placement?
Yeah.
The child didn't make the placement. The child didn't decide whether it was going to be close or far to the things that mattered to them, to the people they loved. The child didn't pick the rules for the placement. No, the child didn't fail the placement. The case plan failed. And, or another I'll give you that is just rankles me, is when a child goes missing and we use the word AWOL.
Mm,
AWOL is a military term. It means absent without leave.
right.
Foster care is not a military institution. A child in foster care is not an adult soldier. But here's the thing, when we use that, the way we use it is to blame the kid. And it comes out in the sentence, you went AWOL. And that's incredibly damaging because what it does is it ignores all the circumstances that led that child to leave, the lack of trust that child had in the system to protect them, to love them. It also lets us off the hook because the moment we cast blame on the other, we just stop.
Mm-hmm.
So case planning stops, an examination of ourselves stops. And so I think that it's, for me, the biggest thing that I remember as a kid is that sense of blame and that sense of being less. And the only other word I would use or phrase is the phrase foster child. How that hung on me.
Yeah.
And when I talk to young people today, when I talk to clients, when I talk to people who have left the system, that phrase just hung on to everything in my childhood. It was what defined me, what would
Yeah.
determine what I did. Everything was suddenly defined to this one system and this one phrase. And that's where we get into these incredible limitations and that feeling of shame. And what I wish for folks who, young people, old people, um, is to try to get to that feeling of forgiveness. And not because you're letting them off the hook. They shouldn't be let off the hook. But in forgiveness, you let yourself off the hook. And that's the important thing.
Yeah. That's beautiful. But it takes a lot to get there. It's a long road typically, right, to get to that place where you can forgive and move forward
Yeah.
to.
So to your point, I mean, I was not walking around. I want to just say how I'm very grateful that I went to Harvard Law School. That was, extraordinary, and the things that have happened in my life that would have never happened had I not gone to that school. But at the same time, I was not walking around and saying, "Hi, I grew up in foster care," and "Hello, I'm a former foster child."
Right.
And I think anyone who's been in the system has a sense of why. You can't bring it up socially because it becomes so complicated. The simple thing of, do you have brothers and sisters? Normally for folks, oh yeah, I've got two or three. I have none. I'm an only child. You ask that of a foster child, and it becomes the most complicated, most sensitive, revealing question that you could have. Or ask them anything about, what was your home like when you grew up? An easy question for anyone else.
Yeah.
But for someone who went through multiple homes, someone who never quite knew what home was, it becomes very, very difficult.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And when you think about, right, where you were and now where you are, and just everything that you've done in between, you've done so much advocacy work You've helped shape some policies from what I remember. You have just been a voice, but also an important contributor, right? And now as an advocate and champion of fosters. What is a key area of policy that is super important for you to highlight?
Well, I begin with what I see often and is the most difficult is often the absence of kindness. Um, and I get in a little bit of trouble saying for this when we talk about trauma informed, right? At the end of the day, what we're really talking about is kindness and sensitivity, recognition. I know there's a lot more, and there's a lot more to being trauma informed, but that's really where it comes from. When it comes to an area that is very important to me is the inclusion of families, um, and recognizing their voice, recognizing that they are where a child belongs. And when I say families, I want to be very clear. I'm talking about natural families, the family that the child came from. And I think we've made some progress, but not enough. And so when I go to family team meetings or watch family team meetings, or I'm on a conference call where there's a family, I still feel that bit of judgment, and and sometimes it's more than a bit. And my response is usually a smile and a mild correction, but I suppose a desire to also say to folks who feel that judgment, take a moment and think how lucky you are. Take a moment to think, to have compassion. Take a moment to think that you don't know this person. You don't know what it's like to lose your child and then get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, look in the bathroom mirror, and stare at yourself. You don't know what that's like. Or when a woman or a man's rights are terminated, you don't understand, and we don't talk about the lifelong effect that has on a person. So I wish that we would more fully embrace those things. To go into concrete matters, we take far too many children into foster care. We take them in for the wrong reasons. The majority of foster children are there for reasons of poverty, not because of abuse. And you can design a social policy that is around solving poverty by taking children, but it clearly doesn't work very well. And what I would say is also this notion that when you take a child from a family, that itself is not highly traumatic. I will never forget the day on Lankershim Boulevard in North Hollywood, California. It was a Saturday early morning when I was taken from my mom. When you ask a child or a young person, tell me about that day, they recall it with astounding detail. That is highly traumatic. It is singeing. It will never leave them. But then the other thing I think we need to remember is also the existence of trauma within the foster care system itself. And to recognize that we may actually be introducing more trauma into a child's life when we remove them than the trauma that they may be experiencing in their own family. It is not our job, I'll just say this, it is not our job or our business to attempt to make families perfect by what we define as perfect.
Right. Because each family's needs are unique. Each family's circumstances are unique. And without, for lack of better words, without like being in their position, without being in their shoes, how the heck do you know what's best for them and their kids? Right. And I think the system is so quick to react versus trying to understand what that family and what those parents and what that child's like lived experience is and where those gaps are. And they don't need fixing. They need help. They need support.
Yes, and that's I think is a great way to put it. I don't think anyone outside the foster care system would much appreciate it if we walked up to them and said, "Hey, I'm going to fix your family. I've just noticed this. I'm going to fix your family." Want to come in? It's insulting, it's condescending, and in the case of foster care, it's dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had foster and adoptive siblings where there was still contact with their birth parents or parent, depending on the situation. And that was traumatic too. Like people always talk about like, oh, if you have like this, if they're still able to see their birth family, if they're still able to have that contact, or even like open adoptions, right? If they still can like communicate and build a relationship. Yes, that is true. It is good. But two things can be true at once. I always say this. Two things are true at once. It is good for the child and it's also harmful for the child, because every single time that they're not allowed to go home with their parent, or they're reminded, right, like you're in this foster home or now you've been adopted by this other family, it brings up just so much trauma for them. It imparts so much trauma on them, of feelings of being unworthy, feelings of being not enough, feelings that I did this, I'm the problem. Not to mention just like the continued tearing apart of those two people or three people. You're every time that child visits with their, like I remember one of my foster siblings, he had a single mom. The mom, would have partners from time to time, but single mom. He was so excited to see her all the time. Like every visit was just, he was ecstatic. Then every time after that visit, he sunk into a deep depression. Every time. And he got, I think, like visits every couple weeks. It was heartbreaking. And like that trauma kept being inflicted on him, but it was like good for him, right? And it's just, we often don't think about both sides of the impact. And I think, the dominant narratives in the system are still dominant when they shouldn't, when we should really adjust our understanding and adjust our focus on, how is this impacting the child versus how is this impacting like the foster home or the foster parents or, our institutional numbers, right? Like there's so much emphasis on that and not enough emphasis on like, man, this child, like what we're doing is really impacting this child. Let's look at it from that lens first and foremost, and let that inform, right, how we are creating policies on how we move that child through these homes and through these systems. Like clearly, right, we've been saying this for a long time, but it's still not happening. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, certainly one of them, I appreciate that. I think one of them that I would ask is, how many times did someone sit down with that boy and ask him how he felt? I do talk about this quite a lot, is how we do not and are afraid to sit down with children and ask them how they feel, because we're afraid of the answer. And for most foster children, if you ask them, what would you like right now? Overwhelmingly, they'll say, I want to go back to mom. I want to go back home. And that's a very intimate, difficult conversation. And so we avoid it, right? We don't want to go there, right? But not going there doesn't mean make it go away for the child. The child continues to think about it. No one ever asked me about my mom, but I thought about her every day. I thought about her every day long after I left foster care.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I can remember sometime, like gosh, after law school, where I realized I only think about her every couple days now. But it's that fear and that unwillingness to engage with what is actually going on inside a child and to show that you care that is missing. And I would say, sorry, and how that doesn't just end, right? So after I graduated from law school, I went briefly to work at a very big law firm. And I don't know how many people are familiar with the geography of Los Angeles or LA traffic, but it's pretty bad.
It's bad. Yeah, it's bad.
It's bad. It's
the
bad.
405 is terrible.
The 405 is, do not go on the 405. Exactly. Um, so after work, so I worked on the West Side, right, where Fancy Law Firm was, and every, I don't know, every 2, 3 weeks after I finished work, I would drive all the way from the 405 across town, all the way up to North Hollywood, and all the way onto, and folks want to look it up, Otsego Boulevard, which is in North Hollywood. It's a little tiny street.
Yeah.
I would park the car and I would just stare at the last apartment that my mom and I were in. It's on the second floor corner, big window, I can tell you. And I never got out of the car.
Yeah.
And then I would just leave. And I think that it's that what a therapist once told me or described it as the call of the familiar, and how hard that is to let go. And when it comes to kids today, we ought to recognize that. And we ought not to be afraid of it if we want to help.
And when you think back, you think about her almost every day. You used to go visit where you used to live with her all the time. And just that like huge loss, right? When you're reflecting on it now, what would have been the most helpful piece of support that the system could have provided so that you didn't have to go through that for decades?
Sure. I think so. It's really concrete, to be honest. I think someone could have sat down with me before I was in 11th grade and explained the disease that my mother developed, paranoid schizophrenia. Could have actually explained what that was rather than leaving me to try and figure that out by myself.
Yeah.
Looking it up in encyclopedias, for example, trying to find it in my high school library. Could have sat down and explained what that meant and what that did to her and why she was where she was and what her absence was the result of. And no one did that. And instead, it vacillated from her being just this vast void of never saying anything to condemnation. Your mother failed you.
Oh.
Your mother, I mean, your mother was a nut, right?
Oh.
So I think that was something that was terribly missing. And I mentioned that I could have gone back to a family. Well, my grandmother actually found me finally, and she was the first one to actually say it wasn't her fault.
Yeah.
Don't blame her. So I think if again, and I think when I think of that, that's why I say things like, would you please, when I talk to departments, when I talk to CASAs, when I talk to social workers, when I talk to lawyers, judges, would you please not be afraid of those questions?
Yeah.
Because when you're afraid of those questions, you're not really addressing the child's fear, you're addressing your own.
Yeah.
And let's see what's good for the kid.
Absolutely. 100%. 100%. We know, policies vary and differ state to state, and on a federal level, right, they differ.
And county to county.
And county to county, right. And sometimes from social worker to social worker and how they implement. Yeah. But, regardless of just the discrepancies that can happen there, in your time now of advocating and supporting for youth in the system, what are some of the biggest strides that you've seen? Good, positive, forward momentum?
Well, I think one, and I think you and I both show this, is you actually do hear from young people. Either they're mostly have left the system or they're over 18.
Yes.
You actually do hear their voice. And you occasionally do hear the voice of some who are still in the system, but it's relatively few. I think the reason why you do, obviously people would point to legality. I think that's a bit of a ruse. I think we could fix that.
Yeah.
But I think that's a major improvement. Now, what I will say is what I would like to also see are voices that we still don't hear that often. So we very often hear from voices that are, I'm making an assumption, they're a bit like you and me. Voices that are successful, voices that have done well, and voices that will likely make the audience or the listener comfortable, right? And I'm going to bet that you know how to say things in a way that's going to put a person at ease. You learned that a long time ago. Even if it's not quite the truth, you'll know how to do it, right? And those are the sorts of young people and kids we hear from. And what I would like to hear from more are kids that might make us uncomfortable. And it's not that they're making us uncomfortable, it's the reality that they've had that's making us uncomfortable. And so kids, for example, who move from foster care into juvenile justice, or kids with disabilities,
Yeah.
Either physical or mental disabilities. Those sorts of kids I think we need to hear more of.
Or they're experiencing homelessness, or they
Absolutely.
have trouble with employment. Yeah. All of those things. Absolutely.
I think it's, and it goes to, and this is where there'll be this big gasp of shock. We don't ever hear, and haven't done any real analysis that's going to affect a system that's how well did we do. Now we have measures, right? We could go through the federal government and how they do this. I won't bore people with that, but we do it. But what is missing from those is we don't go back to children and families and say, how did we do?
Yeah.
Every company that I know that is as a large company is designed to serve people, they want to know. And so we ought to do exit interviews. How'd we do?
Yeah, more longitudinal studies, it sounds like, is what you're saying.
And I would actually say in the moment, yes, those get to longitudinal studies, but also, ask a parent, do you feel we worked with you honestly in a straightforward, upfront, caring, helpful manner? And maybe we'll like the answer, but maybe we won't.
Right.
But we need to know those answers. We like to call it the Department of Children and Family Services, but we're not so willing to engage in how those children and families feel about us.
Yeah.
And we need to know that.
Is that the next big policy that you'll be advocating for?
I mentioned it. I don't know whether that one's good. That's the way policy works. That would be a fairly big ask from systems. And I get it. It is hard to look at yourself, but systems need to do that.
But we can ask them, right?
We certainly can. We absolutely can.
Pushing for it. We can keep pushing for it.
So I will say, for example, when I've done trainings for congregate care facilities and group homes, and there's been an unsuccessful, what we call an unsuccessful exit. A child has left because the child has left the placement of their own choice, or a child has been asked to leave. The child isn't asked to leave. The child has been taken earlier. And saying to these organizations and to these placements, when that happens, you need to sit down and ask, why did we fail? What didn't work? Because that is an excellent moment for learning.
Mm-hmm.
How could we do better? We didn't, and what I would say also is in this point, I don't think that foster care departments or group homes or social workers or judges I don't think any of these people want kids to fail. If we could be braver to look at ourselves, we would do so much better. So.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for your insight on that. I want to talk a little bit about, this part of your life work. You have 2 books. The most recent one is The Child Catcher. Why? I mean, of course, people either love writing books or hate writing books. Not everyone dreams about writing a book, right? Talk to me a little bit about your journey about writing your 2 books.
I've been very fortunate with them. I was very fortunate with Hope's Boy. I'm very fortunate with The Child Catcher. I do actually feel a great sense of gratitude when I do write these stories. In my first book, that was largely the chance to talk about my mom and talk about her struggle. That's why it's called Hope's Boy, not Andy Bridge or something like that, or Andy. In the second book, it is about the first lawsuit that I worked on as a young lawyer, and in that book I talk a lot about the families that we're talking about. And a facility in southern Alabama that was one of the most notorious in the South a facility that we find today across the country in the troubled teen industry that was notorious. A facility that literally the year before we arrived, 2 boys had attempted to hang themselves. That idea of being able to take something out of the shadows,
Yeah.
and that someone who may never meet a foster child or know that they've met a foster child, may never not really know anything about the system other than the bits and snips that they gather from what they hear or read online, that they would be interested. So one of the greatest rewards is when I get a note or a little message that says, I didn't know anything about foster care,
Yeah.
but this opened my eyes. Or I didn't know anything about foster care, but and this is what it really is rewarding. But when you talk about what happened here, I didn't grow up in foster care, but it reminded me of something in my own life.
Yeah.
So there's a connection. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So,
No, I appreciate people like you who do write books like this, because it's a labor of love, like true labor of love. Going through all, your traumatic experiences, putting it on paper, going through experience of others that are traumatic whom you've supported, and putting it on paper, it's extremely hard. And I don't know if people know that, right? Like how hard it really is to write things like these that are in service to the greater good, but it takes a toll on the author. And so I really appreciate you writing these and being an advocate and a voice for those of us who can't or won't or are not yet ready to share things like this. And for us, from our own voices, to be able to shift narratives, eliminate or at least minimize biases and misconceptions, and to infuse humanity into our experience, for people to see us as whole people. And like you said, not just, oh, foster child.
yeah.
Check. I
Yeah.
already know that kid.
Well,
Foster.
and that's where we began, right? When we talked about trauma informed, why I prefer the word kindness. We the foster care systems litter with distancing and acronyms, distancing words that keep us away from what's really going on. And I'm not going to bore the audience with them, but you read these things and it's like, well, this just makes no sense. What are they talking about?
Right.
And the opportunity to actually take that away and make it human. To be able to talk about, in for example, in the child catcher, talk about what happened to a boy who spent time in this institution and suffered grievously, who ended up going back to his family as a broken boy,
Yeah.
but have them know that family and know that boy, and know who David Dolheit was. So.
Yeah. No, it's super important. And it's really important, right, that it's coming, the storytelling is coming from somebody that understands what it's like to be that boy, to be a part of that system.
Yeah, it's interesting. I do. I'm a little careful about that because I recognize that everyone's experience is unique.
Mm-hmm.
And so, one thing that, for example, I want everyone who's listening to understand, just because this is important to me, for example, I have never sat down with a foster child. I've never sat down with a family. I've never sat down with anyone that I've worked with in that way and told them that I grew up in the system. Because that's not why I'm there.
Yeah.
I'm there to help them and to honor them. And sometimes sometimes it's incredibly tempting. One of the main kids that I talk about in the child catcher is a boy who was, at that point, he was 13 years old, and I could just feel his desire for connection. And there was a connection between us, and I knew what it was.
Yeah.
Right? And I knew that moment, if I said, I grew up in foster care too, that moment would feel so gratifying to both of us. But I also knew that would be a very selfish moment, and that what he really needed from me is to be a kind listening lawyer. So.
Yes. And I really respect the boundaries that you've put in place to protect the kids that you're supporting and the families that you're supporting and yourself too. It's super important. And my whole point in what I shared was that from the perspective, right, of this book and your storytelling to the audience in general, like society in general, like knowing that you experience the system and you're speaking to it, like that is really powerful. But I absolutely really appreciate and understand the boundaries of you not sharing that lived experience with someone who is their client or whom you're supporting within the system. I get that.
But I think also, I'm sorry, just going to say, I'm sorry, is speaking to the system is so important. I wish we would do more of that.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I'll be talking to someone, or I'll be invited to something, and someone who has no involvement in foster care will say, what can I do? And of course, I could say you can become a foster parent. There are all sorts of, you could become a CASA. There are all sorts of things that you could do. And often that's, quite frankly, too much. They don't have time. It just feels too much to them.
Yeah.
And so, what I do wish is that people would just talk about it. And so, the next time you drop your fifth grader off at their elementary school, ask their teacher, hey, how many foster children go to this school? Do you have any idea? Or next time you're in Safeway or Ralph's or wherever you happen to be shopping, ask the assistant manager, do you give foster youth jobs?
Yeah.
There's so many ways that we could just invite this into a conversation. And that is the one thing that I would say I think has begun to decline. I think we used to talk about foster care more. And I wish we continue. Yeah. So.
Interesting that you have that perspective. And I'm so happy you shared that, because that was my next question for you is, at the Inclusion Initiative, we talk a lot about allyship. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to ask you, how can people who have not experienced the system, who don't have this lived experience, like how can they be in allyship with us? And you answered that wonderfully. And it makes us think about just like the really small moments that we can take that literally don't cost a thing, right? It takes 2 seconds to ask a question like that, but it makes a tremendous difference on knowledge, on awareness. And then eventually, right, it creates momentum for more support and more advocacy. Because you get the wheels turning. Maybe Ralph's is in the West Coast. So here on the East Coast, it's like Whole Foods or whatever. But if you're asking them,
ask Whole Foods,
hire foster youth, they might not yet, but your question might spark that forward momentum for them to think about, okay, we can plug into the community and show advocacy and support by creating a policy where we are considering people that have lived experience in the system to come work for us, right? And opening up those opportunities. And I, as a young person, I worked a lot of part-time jobs, a lot. Like that's how I made my living for a long time. Without those, it would have not been good, right, for me. But because I got those part-time opportunities, even though they were minimum wage and, I had to work 4 of them at the same time to make it work. I got it helped me so much. It helped me build a life. And here I am today, successful, thriving, happy, and doing work like this. And so just like that small 2-second moment that you talked about, just asking the question, talking about it to somebody, it makes a huge, huge difference. So thank you so much for bringing that up.
Oh, no, thank you. I mean, I share that with you. I mean, working in a grocery store in 11th grade, or I don't think I much liked it, but working in the back of a pizza joint in 10th grade made me and reminded me that I was, and sometimes people have trouble with this word, but I was normal. Anyone who has a child, I think people that don't, know how important that is for a child. That sense of normal. And everything around this system tells that child, you're not.
Yeah.
And that's devastating. And so please, yes, go out to Whole Foods and for that overpriced carrot, tell them they can go ahead and they can have a foster child come and work. And
And
they're going to be a heck of an employee. So
a heck of an employee, and it makes a huge difference. And then they're a part of this change and the solution, right?
absolutely, yeah.
In the small ways that they can be. Well, I want to move us into our rapid fire questions in just a moment.
Okay.
But before we transition to that, just want to encourage everyone, visit andrewbridgeauthor.com. We'll drop all the links in the show notes. The Child Catcher is available now, so please order the book. Please come into allyship with us and learn about these incredible and just, they're heartbreaking stories, but it's important for us to be aware of what's happening in the system. And like Andrew said, we got to talk about it. We can't talk about it if we don't know what's happening, right? And so read the book, buy the book, give it to a friend. The holidays are coming up. Put it on your Christmas list or holiday list. And, just support in this small way. And you can also work with Andrew in a variety of ways. Trainer, speaker. You do a lot of keynote speaking, I've noticed, Andrew. So I would love for the audience to just keep that in mind for you. And we'll drop all the ways to contact him in the show notes. And if there's anything additional you want to mention, Andrew, where people can find you.
That is so kind. I'm good with that. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much. I wasn't expecting that. It's very kind of you. Thank you.
I mean, come on. Together we're stronger. We need to be in community together, right? And so happy to elevate your work and just grateful for you being in this conversation with us today. And okay, let's dive into rapid fire. You ready?
Okay, here we go.
Don't think too hard, Mr. Lawyer. Okay?
Okay, Mr. Lawyer.
All right. Okay. Favorite food?
Spicy tuna rolls.
Yes, that's my go-to as well. Yeah. Love. Yeah. Awesome. What do you consider your superpower as a foster?
The ability to know when to be quiet and just listen. Yeah.
Wow.
We would call that just shutting up. The ability to. So yeah.
It's a very powerful skill, though. I love that. What did you dream of doing when you were a kid?
Oh. If you asked me in second grade, and there's a bit of I would have said I wanted to be an ambulance driver. Oh. Now, don't make a joke about the fact that I became a lawyer, and so instead of driver, I became chaser. But yes, in second grade, that was my answer. I remember my second grade teacher asking, and I said I want to drive ambulances.
Wow. Yeah. You're the first person I've met that has said that. That's so interesting. That's fascinating. No, but it makes sense. You wanted to help people. You wanted to help them. Yeah. What's one thing on your bucket list still?
I certainly finished my third book, and let me say, I want to go to Alaska. To be honest, I've never been to Alaska. I want to go to Alaska. I'm going to do that before. So there.
Oh, wow!
Things on my bucket list. Yeah, never done it.
Like for the wildlife, or just because, or
for the beauty. Yeah. And the peace. Yeah. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I can get on board. I want to do an Alaskan cruise. I think
that would be super fun. That would be super fun.
And whale watching. Oh,
yeah.
So beautiful.
Amazing.
That's awesome. Okay. And then the last thing, what is a piece of advice you'd like to share with our audience?
For those of you who spent time in the system or in the system, never forget yourself. Never forget who you are. Never forget who you came from. Never forget you matter. And in those moments when you feel like no one cares, there are people who do care. And reach out, because you will find them.
Thank you, Andrew. That's beautiful. Yeah, I like to remind people of that all the time. You matter, period. Because you're a human being, you matter.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for being on the show, Andrew. And our audience listening in, thanks for joining us. As always, please rate the show, follow the show, share the show. And we are so excited to have even more amazing, incredible guests just like Andrew join us in the future. And one more plug for the Inclusion Initiative. On November 15th, we're hosting our inaugural 2025 Leadership Summit in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And so tickets are live. We've got a great speaker lineup of 14 different fosters and adoptees sharing their thought leadership in the world of work and wealth building and economic opportunity. It's going to be fabulous. And so please join us. Please share that with a friend. Again, we'll drop everything in the show notes. And Andrew, thanks for being such an amazing guest. We really appreciate you and all that you do.
This has been so much fun. It's been such an honor. Thank you for having me. Thank you for including me.
Of course. And you're welcome back anytime.
Thank you.
Great.
I hope so. Okay.
All right, everyone. Take care. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please subscribe, share, and follow us. Check out our show notes to know where to find us on social. And our website is theinclusioninitiative.com. If you're an adoptee of color or a foster care alum, and you want to join our professional community, it's free, by the way, hit me up via DM, or you can find our email in the show notes. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.